My name is Alex Garcia, and for the past 17 years, I've been the family's invisible son, the one who drooled over computers instead of inheriting concrete and steel empires. I'm 35, CEO of Nimbus Inc., a cloud-based AI startup in the heart of Silicon Valley. Growing up in my grandparents' sprawling Victorian in Palo Alto, I watched my cousins parade through those mahogany doors. Theo, in a crisp white coat as a Dr. Ava with her law school diploma, Finn climbing corporate ladders, all basking in admiring glances and gold watches. Me. I was the kid who dropped out of law school to play with computers. They'd scoff, and the only spotlight I ever felt was the one I cast on my shoes as I picked them up off the lobby floor where no one else bothered to move. I learned early that cheap gifts gave them more excuses to dismiss me. So every Tuesday at 6, I'd drive 3 towns over to Sunset Vista, the affluent nursing home where Grandma Iris lived, carrying a cooler of her famous chocolate chip cookies, each one etched with IQ and melted dark chocolate. That little symbol was my silent promise I would always remember her because everyone else refused to. I watched it all happen. Veronica Hayes, 50th birthday perfection partner at Hayes & Moore, stepping around me to embrace some more legitimate grandchild. Randall Hayes, CFO of the family construction business that Grandma helped build with nothing but grit and one pickup truck back in 1952, discussing property taxes with his wife as they sized up the antique grandfather clock in the corner, oblivious to the way its pendulum had stopped ticking the moment Dad died. My parents, Maria Garcia, a devoted elementary teacher, and the late Victor Garcia, had hoped I'd be the family's legacy lawyer, the one to wrest control of that business back into our bloodline. Instead, when I announced my master's in computer science and a 7-figure contract with a Fortune 500 client, our family group chat went silent for 3 days. 3 days. Meanwhile, Finn's assistant manager promotion at a coffee chain, plastered $12 an hour, sparked 47 congratulations. A gold watch, 3 dinner invitations. Me, not a single well done. Even though I'd quietly built Nimbus Sync into a multi-million-dollar AI powerhouse, my hierarchy in their eyes never rose above that basement-dwelling loser. But every Tuesday, I'd strap on my worn leather jacket pocket, bulging with cookies, and walk through the automatic doors of Sunset Vista. The staff greeted me by name. Nimbus's friend is here, they'd say over the intercom, and I'd feel a warmth from strangers that I'd never felt from my own blood. Grandma Iris, sharp-witted at 93, would lean forward on her walker, eyes lighting up as she tasted each fresh cookie. Later, during her fiercely competitive chess matches, I'd watch her capture my bishop with that mischievous glint in her eye, the one that dared the world to doubt her. She'd recount stories of starting a construction empire in an era when no one believed a woman could run a crew, proving skeptics wrong with every brick laid. She understood my code and my dreams better than anyone who shared my last name. When her health declined, I was the only one who came weekly. No texting, real visits. No quick calls, genuine conversation. She asked about Nimbus Sync's server infrastructure, our upcoming mobile AI integration, the client acquisition pipeline. I answered, we connected. Then came the day I got the text, Mom here. Dad passed? Funeral details TBA. No call, a group text, like announcing dinner plans. I almost didn't go to the will reading, another staged family event where I'd be the hired help. But Attorney Morrison's words on the phone stopped me cold. Iris Patterson specifically requested your presence. That was enough. In the mahogany-paneled courtroom, the Hayes clan gathered like vultures around a meat platter. Veronica's bulletproof leather portfolio sat open on her lap. Randall had his calculator out. Ava was scrolling through BMW listings. They'd already rehearsed their victory speeches. And then Morrison read Grandma's will. He paused, then spoke in measured calm. To my daughter Veronica, who visited twice in 5 years, I leave my disappointment and best wishes for your future endeavors. To my son Randall, who sent flowers once a year without knowing which grandson he was speaking to, I leave my profound sadness at your choices. To my grandchildren, Theo, Ava, Finn, and others who treated me as an account number, I leave exactly what you showed me, none whatsoever. Murmurs died. Veronica's mascara ran. Randall's face turned crimson. And then when they thought the shock was enough, Morrison handed me a thick envelope stamped "For Alex's eyes only" in my grandmother's looping script. Inside, her letter warned me of everything: their empty promises, their mock concern. She'd documented every slight, every missed visit, tucked away financial records that exposed their unpaid loans and tax irregularities. The clock in the corner, the one they admired but never noticed had stopped, was still. I took a deep breath, reached under my jacket, and pulled out my recorder. I'd like to share a clip, I said, setting down a speaker. First, Veronica's voice at last year's Christmas dinner. He's pathetic still playing with computers at his age. Theo's a doctor. Ava's a lawyer. Then Randall's crisp dismissal. Maybe manual labor will teach him humility. Then Ava giggling with her sorority sisters about family embarrassments. Their words echoed reverberating off polished wood and leather chairs. I pressed stop. That's 6 years of audio. Silence. The air conditioner's hum sounded like guilt itself. As the truth settled, the family's feigned outrage at Grandma's decisions smashed against the reality of their own recorded cruelty. And in that moment, I realized I was no longer the boy waiting for scraps of acknowledgement. I was the man who had mastered his own fate. They tried to contest the will, invoking undue influence. Their voices rose in a fevered crescendo of entitlement and spite, but the nursing home staff testified 6 years, not one Tuesday missed. The legal challenge collapsed. Their foreclosure notices arrived days later. Veronica lost her home. Randall's bar restaurant shuttered. Theo's engagement imploded. Ava worked 3 jobs to pay off debts she assumed the inheritance would cover. And my parents, my own mom and dad, showed up at Nimbus Inc.'s downtown loft with rehearsed tears begging for a reunion. I offered to check the exact sum of birthday gifts they'd spent over a decade. Their jaws dropped. "Consider us even," I said, voice steady. So now here I stand in the quiet of my office, the pendulum of that old clock finally swinging again. Time restored. Above my desk, a plaque reads, Iris Patterson Community Center. The old family mansion reborn as a hub for underprivileged kids to learn coding and cloud computing. Nimbus Sync thrives the construction company, hums under professional management, and I've invited only Ava to my wedding next month. She's the one who sat across from me in a coffee shop, tears raw with genuine remorse, admitting her jealousy and choosing to change. As I close this chapter, I wonder, will any of them find a way back? Or is some debt of the heart simply too great to ever repay? And that, my friends, is where this story pauses on the edge of a question. Can redemption ever truly be earned when forgiveness itself is at stake? Stay tuned for the next chapter, because when your presence is finally a gift, you learn that acceptance isn't demanded, it's deserved. The morning after the courtroom battle, I woke to an unfamiliar peace. The weight of Grandma Iris's will no longer pressed on my chest. Instead, there was a hollow echo where resentment had lived. My loft, perched above downtown Palo Alto, felt strangely serene as sunlight slanted through floor-to-ceiling windows, sunlight that until yesterday had illuminated nothing but my anxieties. But today, it shone on possibilities. As I reached for my phone to silence the flood of missed messages, I paused. There were dozens texts from Veronica pleading for a family strategy session, from Randall requesting just coffee, bro, and an avalanche of emojis from Theo and Ava. My thumb hovered over the screen. Replying felt like handing them a lifeline. Ignoring felt callous. In that moment, I realized the power I held in action was as much a decision as any check I might write. So I left the messages unread, set the phone aside, and stood up. It was time to let the quiet guide me, not the clamor of entitlement. I made coffee in my minimalist kitchen single-origin beans hand-drip filter and carried the steaming mug back to my desk past the antique grandfather clock in the corner. It was still ticking now, its pendulum swaying with deliberate grace. I'd wound it last night in the hush after everyone stormed out of the judge's chambers, as if reanimating that clock could resurrect something lost, the heartbeat of a family that had ignored me. Instead, it felt like a testament to survival. I ran my fingers along its polished oak frame and felt a surge of clarity. This clock would no longer symbolize neglect. It would tick only for me and my ideals. Later that morning, I logged into Nimbus Sync's conference page. My co-founder, Sophia Morales, was already there, adjusting her webcam backdrop. Her face lit up when she saw me. "Alex," she said, voice warm but serious. "The board meeting starts in 30. Investors want an update on our Series B round, especially after the press overnight." The Chronicle ran a front-page story, "Black Sheep to Silicon Hero." I smiled at the headline, an ironic twist reprising Grandma's gift of poetic justice. "Good. Let them watch," I replied. "I've got the numbers, but I want to lead with the story first." On the call, the usual ritual unfolded: slide decks, spreadsheets, projections. But I began differently. I took a deep breath and unlocked my screen to display a single image: Grandma Iris's handwritten note, crumpled but legible, declaring her trust in me and exposing the family's failures. "This," I said quietly, "is why Nimbus Sync exists. It's not only about AI, it's about giving voice to the overlooked." The camera light glowed on several faces, venture partners who'd once questioned my pedigree, now nodding. I walked them through our next-gen neural platform, but all the while I felt a radiator of pride flood my chest. This startup was my rebellion, my tribute, my testament. After the call, I lingered at my desk, scrolling back through the voice memos I'd recorded over the years. Secret confessions of my family members picked up in hallways at holiday dinners, even in the grand foyer of that house. I paused on one from the night Mom announced Grandma's fall into memory care, her voice cracking as she said, "He's fine, just socially delayed, Mom's attempt to defend me still dripped with condescension. I slipped the headphone back on and pressed play, bracing myself. Then something strange happened between Mom's defeatist words and the snapping silence. I heard Grandma's voice, soft, encouraging. "He's learning to speak in ways we haven't yet come to understand." It was a recording I'd made during one of our final chess games together. The memory hit me like a gentle hammer. Conquering life wasn't about meeting others' expectations. It was about honoring the faith someone special had in you. That afternoon, I drove to Elena Tran's office, a discreet suite in Palo Alto's financial district. Elena, with her impeccable tailored suits and calm efficiency, had been Grandma's executor of trust and my unexpected ally. She greeted me with a file folder stamped "Confidential." Inside were transaction logs and loan records, evidence that Veronica and Randall had siphoned funds from the construction business for years, laundering money through shell corporations to maintain their opulent lifestyles. "I thought you'd want a copy," Elena said. "Use it only if you need leverage." Her eyes, empathetic and unwavering, gave me permission to wield this truth. I slipped the folder into my briefcase and felt a surge of responsibility. These pages weren't just paper. They were the unvarnished reflection of betrayal. On my drive back, I stopped at Sunset Vista. The nursing home was quieter in the afternoon. I found Lily Chen in the hallway, her medical scrubs pastel blue, her eyes weary but welcoming. "Hey, Nimbus's friend," she teased softly. We settled in Grandma's old sunroom, where the garden courtyard peeked through glass doors. Lily handed me a single cookie, still warm, missing the IQ inscription, but rich with memory. She told me anecdotes, how Grandma insisted on Lunar New Year dumplings alongside her cookies, how the staff kept a photo of Grandma and me on her bulletin board. In that simple gesture, I realized my grandmother's legacy wasn't confined to a will. It lived in the daily kindness of strangers. Walking back to my car, I passed the silent clock tower on the grounds, a smaller echo of the one in my loft. The bell tolled 3 times, a sonorous reminder that time moves whether we notice it or not. I realized then that my real battle wasn't against my family. It was against the fear that I'd become what they always thought I was, a failure unworthy of love. But Grandma's faith and my own perseverance had proved otherwise. That evening, I sat alone in my loft, the city lights blinking below like distant fireflies. I opened the front page of the Chronicle on my coffee table, photos of me in a crisp suit, shaking hands with venture partners, the article trailing out like a victory lap. Yet beneath the headline, my mind drifted to a risk I'd been avoiding: reaching out to Veronica one more time, not to negotiate money, but to demand accountability. I typed her name into my messaging app, Veronica Hayes, and stopped. What would I say? "We need to talk." No. That sounded forced. Then I remembered Grandma's clock. The pendulum doesn't hesitate. It swings with purpose. So I tapped out 3 words: "Meet me Tuesday." I hit send. My heart fluttered in my chest, equal parts dread and defiance. Was I inviting genuine reconciliation or setting a trap? Was this action a step toward closure or another scene in a drama that would never end? As the message left my screen, I watched the little check mark turn green. The decision was out of my hands now. The night deepened, and somewhere a clock chimed 4 times, echoing in the hollow spaces of memory and hope. And that's where I'll leave you for now, at the very edge of a choice that could heal or further fracture the people who defined my life. Stay with me, because next time, I'll tell you what happened when Veronica walked into that cafe and why the meeting ended with a secret that even I didn't see coming. I walked into the Percolator Cafe on Tuesday afternoon, my heart thundering under a crisp Oxford shirt and blazer, an armor I'd only recently adopted. The bell above the door jingled, and I scanned the room, sunlight spilled across exposed brick walls, bouncing off latte art and mid-century chairs. Veronica sat at a corner table, her posture rigid, phone face down beside her espresso. She wore a tailored blazer, navy severe, and her eyes darted up the moment I approached. I swallowed hard, lifting my chin. This was my moment to demand accountability face to face. "Veronica," I said, sliding into the chair opposite her. Her perfume, J'adore, or something equally elegant, swirled in the air, mixing oddly with coffee steam. She managed a polite nod. No hug, no warmth, the same cold courtesy she'd reserved for me all those years. I placed my briefcase on the table and unclipped the buckle. "Thanks for coming," I began, voice steady. "I have 3 things I want from you: explanation, apology, and proof of intent." Her eyes flickered. She'd expected money apologies scripted by lawyers, anything but this raw confrontation. I leaned forward. "You accuse me of everything from being delusional to needing manual labor to learn humility. You called me pathetic. I want to know why." Her jaw tightened. She folded her hands around the espresso cup. "You're making this difficult, Alex." Her words echoed the same dismissal she'd used at holiday dinners, but today I held the power. I lifted the folder Elena had given me and slid it across the table. Veronica's eyes widened when she saw the shell company documents, the ledgers of diverted funds from the Hayes construction accounts. "These are your doing," she whispered. I nodded. "You and Randall profited off Grandma's business for years, hiding assets through the offshore entities. Did you think I wouldn't find out?" The cafe noise dimmed in my ears. I watched her face flush, blinking quickly to hold back tears, or maybe fury. She exhaled, a voice brittle. "You can't prove intent. You'll need a court order." The words landed like a challenge. I set my phone on the table, flipped it open to the voice memo screen. "Then listen to this." I pressed play. Veronica's voice filled the intimate space. "He'll never amount to anything. Watching him squirm is half the fun." She froze, lips parting. I allowed the recording to finish before cutting it with a tap. Silence stretched between us, thick as cold cream. Other patrons glanced over their conversations, paling in contrast to the electric tension at our table. Finally, she looked away, then back at me, eyes glistening. "You're blackmailing me," she accused. I shook my head. "I'm demanding you own your words. This isn't about money, it's about truth." My words hovered in the cafe's warm light. I felt a curious calm settle over me, as though the pendulum in my loft clock had found its rhythm again. "I'd like a sincere apology, Veronica. Not for my sake, but because Grandma deserved honesty. You told her you loved her, and she believed it." My knuckles whitened on the table edge. She swallowed, her voice trembling. I was scared. Scared that you'd ruin the family business, that you'd expose everything." A crack in her poise. "I thought if you seemed powerless, you'd stay out of the way." Her confession landed like a cold stone. Everything she'd done, every slight, every exclusion, had been calculated self-preservation, and I had known it deep down. I leaned back, folding my arms. "So you turned love into leverage." She nodded, tears finally spilling down pale cheeks. "I'm sorry." The word felt emptier than the hollow spaces between years of neglect. I closed the folder. "I forgive you conditionally." Her head snapped up. "What does that mean?" I reached into my briefcase and withdrew a small box, the same kind Grandma used for her cookies. Only this one was empty. I set it in front of her. "I want you to fill this with something real Tuesday afternoons for 6 weeks at Sunset Vista. You'll bring Grandma's cookies freshly baked, none of that store-bought nonsense. And you'll sit with me as I play chess with her. That's your chance to show you're not the person in that recording." Veronica's lip quivered. "You're serious?" I nodded. "No lawyers, no money, just presence." Her shoulders sagged, relief and dread mixing in her eyes. She extended a pale hand and shook mine. "I'll do it," she whispered. We left the cafe side by side, a fragile truce in place. Outside, I handed her a printed schedule, 6 dates each at 5:30 p.m., and a recipe card for Grandma's cookies smudged with flour stains. "These are her exact measurements," I said. "Follow them." She tucked everything into her purse, her gaze lingering on the flour-flecked print. Then she looked at me. "Thank you for giving me a path back." Her sincerity cut deeper than any scorn. That night, I replayed our conversation in my loft. The grandfather clock chimed 7 times, its pendulum swinging with quiet conviction. I poured myself bourbon over ice and stood by the window, watching taillights trace ribbons of red on the street below. I felt the tremor of risk in my chest. What if Veronica failed? What if this was another manipulation, another act in her endless drama? But beneath the doubt, I sensed something new: hope. Not the naive hope of a boy craving approval, but the deliberate hope of a man forging his own narrative. The next morning, I arrived early at Grandma's sunroom, an oasis of love-seat chairs and potted ferns. Lily Chen was already there, snapping clean sheets over the chess table. She smiled when she saw me, eyes soft with curiosity. She asked about you, Lily said quietly. Said she can't wait for Tuesday. I felt my throat tighten. This was bigger than reconciliation. It was a rebellion against indifference itself. I unpacked my chess set and lined up the pieces, each one reflecting decades of strategy and sacrifice. At 5:25 p.m., Veronica stepped through the glass doors clutching a paper bag. I greeted her with a nod and offered the chair opposite mine. She set the bag down and pulled out a stack of cookies, perfectly round golden brown, each marked with a hand-inscribed IQ in melted chocolate. I caught my breath, the symbol once my private promise, now hers too. Grandma wrote the recipe on this card, I said. But I trust your skills. She smiled, shaky but genuine. But we settled in the chessboard between us like neutral ground. I bumped her knight forward in an opening move. Your turn? Veronica hesitated, then played her pawn. The game began tentatively, each move a careful overture. Outside, the sun dipped low, painting the courtyard in amber. Lily moved quietly behind us, her presence a safeguard. After several moves, Veronica paused and looked at me. I'm scared I'll mess up, she admitted. I've never baked these from scratch. I reached across and touched her hand. It's not baking I'm testing. It's your willingness to try. Her eyes met mine, and in that vulnerable exchange, I felt a bridge rebuild itself one quiet step at a time. The clock chimed 6 as Grandma's nurse wheeled her into the room. Iris's eyes lit up at the sight of us. She smiled at Veronica, recognition dawning. Well, look at you, Grandma said, voice raspy but warm. You brought cookies. Veronica swallowed and handed her a handful. Grandma bit into one, chewed thoughtfully, then grinned. Not bad, dear. The praise was a blessing neither of us expected. Tears pricked my eyes as I watched them, granddaughter and grandmother, connected by flour and chocolate. In that moment, the world outside stock markets, boardrooms, courtroom verdicts melted away. What remained was simple presence. As the sun set and the session ended, Veronica packed up her shoulders lighter than they'd been in years. She turned to me. Thank you, she whispered. I nodded, but something in her expression told me this was just the beginning. I helped her with the chess pieces, placing them back in the box. The empty cookie tin sat between us, no longer a demand, but a promise fulfilled. Later that night, I found a message on my phone from Randall. Heard you're meeting Veronica. Mind if I join next week? My finger hovered over the reply key. Part of me wanted to slam the phone down. Another part wondered if I'd forgotten what it meant to forgive. I closed the messaging app and left it unread. Instead, I lit the candle on my desk, a single soy wick in a tin stamped Iris Legacy, and watched the flame flicker. It danced like possibility, fragile yet insistent, illuminating the pieces of my reconstructed family one at a time. And here I stand on the cusp of something uncharted. Does rebuilding a bridge over burnt-out embers truly bring warmth, or will it collapse under old patterns? I poured the last of my bourbon, turned off the loft lights, and listened as the grandfather clock struck midnight. Its measured ticks echoed in the dark, each one a reminder that time moves forward whether we forgive or not. Tomorrow at sunset, Veronica and I meet again. But tonight, I'm left alone with a quiet question. Can hearts hardened by neglect be softened by flour and chess moves? Or will the next chapter reveal a deeper fracture still waiting to be mended? The week that followed became a crucible of possibility and peril. Every morning I awoke with a flicker of anticipation in my chest. Would today be the day Veronica truly showed up unguarded and genuine? Or would the old walls of pride and fear close back in on her? My loft, once a sanctuary of glass and steel, began to feel like a stage set between reconciliation and reckoning. I found myself pacing before the grandfather clock each day at precisely 5:15 p.m., watching its pendulum slice the air with deliberate certainty. That pendulum had come to symbolize my own heartbeat, steady forward, unafraid of where the swing might take me. On Wednesday, I received an unexpected text from Theo. He'd somehow corkscrewed out of pediatric residency rounds to drop by Nimbus Sync's headquarters that afternoon. Need your wisdom, the text read. I met him in my glass-walled boardroom, the skyline of Palo Alto humming softly behind us. Theo looked as I remembered him, crisp white lab coat, stethoscope slung over one shoulder, eyes bright but ringed with exhaustion. He collapsed into the chair opposite mine and ran a hand through his hair. I messed up, he said, voice low. My fiancée left me. Turns out she was more interested in your inheritance than my residency salary. And now I'm alone in a furnished apartment that's years ahead of what I can actually afford. He let out a humorless laugh. I thought I was better than that. I leaned back, studying him in the harsh glare of fluorescent lights. Theo had always looked at me with a mixture of pity and envy. This time it was all regret. "What do you want?" I asked. He met my eyes. Advice, he said simply. His vulnerability stripped away the veneer of medical prestige. I realized then that the same emotional scaffolding I'd built for Grandma I could extend to him now. First, I told him you need a plan. Second, you need humility. And third, you need to rebuild your life on your own merits, not your family name. As we sketched out a strategy reducing expenses, reaching out to old colleagues, applying for grants, I felt that old urge to rescue him choke in my throat. But I offered only guidance, not a safety net. Theo nodded, determination flickering. When he left, he paused at the door. "I'm sorry for how I treated you," he said. That apology, raw and unplanned, echoed in the empty room long after he was gone. That evening, the sun dipped below the horizon in a blaze of copper and lavender, and I made my way to Sunset Vista. Veronica arrived a few minutes late, her eyes red as if from crying or stress, and she carried herself with less formal rigidity than before. She handed me a small jar of homemade lemon curd. "Grandma always said this was my best creation," she offered. I tasted it and nodded, tangy sweet, brimming with love. But her offering held deeper significance. She was bringing not just cookies, but a piece of herself. We settled into our usual positions at the chess table. Lily Chen hovered nearby, her presence warm and unintrusive. Grandma's eyes sparkled when she saw the jar. "Lemon curd," she said, voice soft. "That's love in a jar." The moment settled like a benediction. As we played, I watched Veronica's hands tremble as she moved her bishop. Her brow furrowed not in arrogance, but in concentration, a fresh display of her willingness to try and risk failure. A single misplaced knight could cost her the game, just as a single misplaced word could undo months of fragile progress between us. Across the board, Grandma leaned forward and whispered, "Don't be afraid to make mistakes, dear. That's how you learn." The words spoken in 1938 and preserved in my memory recorder became a living mantra. Veronica nodded, and somewhere within me a door cracked open. This wasn't just about making amends, it was about honoring a legacy that transcended grudges. After the game, Grandma took my hand. "I'm proud of you both," she said, her voice thick with emotion. That phrase, so simple, so rare, felt like a medal pinned to my chest. Veronica dabbed at her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. We helped wheel Grandma back to her room, our shoulders brushing in a silent truce. As we reached her door, Veronica turned to me. "I want to do more," she said. "Can I help at Nimbus Sync? I know nothing about software, but I can learn." The ask surprised me. It carried both humility and an admission of respect. I studied her face, lined with remorse but bright with determination, and felt my guard lower. "I'll think about it," I said, voice gentle but firm. She gave me a small, hopeful smile before slipping into Grandma's room. That night, I sat at my desk and stared at the empty lemon curd jar next to my monitor. Its sticky sweetness, a reminder of the day's triumphs and uncertainties. The office was silent, except for the low hum of servers. I opened my messaging app and typed a swift note to Sophia Possible. "Unconventional hire, let's discuss tomorrow." Then I locked my computer, poured a glass of whiskey, and went to stand by the loft's open window. The city lights flickered below, and the grandfather clock in the corner chimed 9 times. Each toll was a heartbeat of possibility. But as I turned away from the window, my phone buzzed. It was a news alert: Hayes Construction under federal investigation. I clicked in dread. The Department of Justice had subpoenaed documents related to offshore accounts, those very shell corporations Elena had exposed. The investigation threatened to collapse the construction empire entirely. Randy and Veronica faced not just disgrace, but criminal charges. My chest tightened. This was bigger than reconciliation. It was a moral reckoning for the entire family. If I stepped in to help, I risked entangling Nimbus Sync in a legal quagmire. If I stayed silent, countless employees and local communities could lose livelihoods. The weight of the decision pressed down on me. As the grandfather clock ticked on, I realized that my next move would define not only my relationship with Veronica, but the very soul of the Hayes legacy. Could I extend help without compromising my hard-won ethics, or would stepping back betray the principles Grandma fought to uphold? The clock's pendulum swung in the darkness, each arc an unanswered question. And there in the hush of my loft, I knew I stood at the edge of another precipice, one where duty, loyalty, and justice collided in ways I never expected. Tomorrow I would have to choose. But tonight, all I could do was listen to the pendulum and wonder, Was redemption a gift or a burden too great to bear? I woke before dawn on the day the subpoenas arrived, roused by a familiar flutter of unease in my chest. The loft was hushed, broken only by the distant hum of early morning traffic and the soft tick of the grandfather clock, its pendulum a steady heartbeat marking the hours I could never reclaim. I poured coffee into my favorite mug, the one Grandma gave me with a stencil of flourishes on its rim, and watched steam curl upward like a promise I wasn't sure I could keep. The city skyline glowed in the pre-sunrise half-light towers, silhouetted against the bloom of pink and gold. Nimbus Sync's servers blinked in racks below me, each indicator light a pulse of possibility code, birthing connection, hope, and sometimes heartache. By 7:30 a.m., I was in my car, speeding across the Dumbarton Bridge toward Hayes Construction's headquarters. The subpoena notice had come via email at midnight, federal investigation, immediate compliance required. I called Elena Tran on the way. Her voice was calm but urgent. They want every single transaction tied to the shell companies. If we comply, Veronica and Randall could face indictments within weeks. If we don't, they could be charged with obstruction. I exhaled slowly, hands tight on the steering wheel. And the local employees, I asked. 1,500 people, Alex. If the company collapses, they lose jobs, benefits, livelihoods. Elena's compassion flickered through the line. Grandma built that business to employ her community. She'd want us to protect the workers. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. Meet me there in an hour. At the construction office, the marble-floored lobby felt colder than its sterile lighting suggested. Randall paced by the reception desk, phone pressed to his ear, his tie askew. He hung up when he saw me and offered a forced smile. Hey, boss, he said, but the greeting sounded like barbed wire. I motioned him aside and showed him the subpoena. His face drained of color. We can't hand over those documents, they'll destroy us. I felt the old ache of betrayal twist in my gut. They already have the evidence, Randy. Elena gave it to the Doge. He shook his head, voice tight. That was Grandma's private files? How could she have given permission? I remembered Grandma Iris's meticulous mind. She'd archived every record, every ledger, every note about debts owed and forgiven. Those papers were her legacy of truth. She knew what they'd do, I said softly. She trusted me to make sure her empire didn't betray her values. He stared at the subpoena, then back at me. So what do we do? I took a deep breath. We comply fully. We'll turn over the documents, but we'll also propose an internal restructuring plan that preserves jobs. We'll show good faith. His eyes narrowed. You'd save me. My chest tightened. I'm saving the people Grandma cared about. Not you, not Veronica. Them. He looked away, jaw clenched. If you can save them, do it. I spent the morning in a conference room stacked with boxes of files, Elena at my side, cataloging and scanning. Every ledger I touched felt like a nail in the coffin of the family secret. But it was also a key to a new door: transparency. By lunchtime, we'd prepared a full disclosure package, complete financial records, audit trails, and a 5-year restructuring proposal emphasizing employee retention, community investment, and ethical governance. I glanced at Elena as she imported the last PDF. Her eyes held exhaustion and resolve. Ready, she asked. I tapped the mouse. Send it. The email shot into cyberspace, and for a moment I watched the loading bar inch forward, as though it were the progress of my own redemption. Back at Nimbus Sync, the office was already buzzing with the news. Headlines flashed on desktops: Hayes construction fights, federal inquiry, Silicon Valley benefactor emerges in family scandal. Colleagues whispered micro-congratulations as I passed. I felt like an imposter standing there in a sharp suit made of others' expectations. But beneath the suit, my heart pounded with a fiercer truth I had chosen: people over profits. Code over corruption. Grandma's values over tradition's blind loyalty. That afternoon, I returned to Sunset Vista for my weekly session with Grandma and Veronica. The afternoon sun filtered through lace curtains, dust motes dancing in the beams. Veronica was already there, sleeves rolled up, helping Lily Chen arrange fresh flowers on Grandma's bedside table. Her cheeks were hollow as if she'd fasted for remorse. When they saw me, Veronica offered a tentative smile. They received the documents, she said quietly. Now we wait. Grandma reached for my hand, her grip frail but firm. Good child, she said, meaning both of us. The memory of her voice, rich with approval, struck me like a prize. We moved to our chess table, but today we didn't play. Instead, Veronica and I sat on either side of Grandma's wheelchair as Lily read aloud from a tattered photo album. Grandma's yellowed photographs showed her in work boots standing by a pickup truck overseeing crews in dusty fields. You were one of the few women on the site, Veronica murmured as she turned a page. Grandma chuckled. You think that was easy? They said women didn't belong there, said, I drained the whole crew's morale. I built that business because I refused to be less than. Her eyes twinkled at me. Just like you refuse to be less than. Veronica wiped her eyes, and I felt a swell of pride and pity for her tangled guilt. We closed the album and sat in silence, the weight of generational struggle pressing in the quiet room. Later that evening, I returned to my loft. The city lights winked below steady as the servers humming in my office. I poured another bourbon and tracked the news alerts employees' union leaders were praising the transparency move, accusing the Hayes family of initial deception but applauding their turn toward accountability. I typed a quick note to Elena. Prepare for damage control PR. We need a press release from Grandma's Foundation emphasizing corporate ethics. Then I set my phone aside and walked to the window, trading bourbon for contemplation. The grandfather clock struck 8, each gong a reminder of moments slipping away. I thought of Theo's pleading for advice, of Veronica's trembling bishop moves, of Randall's hollow apology. Each interaction had honed me, sharpened my sense of where power and ethics intersect. But one figure haunted me most, Ava. Throughout this ordeal, she'd stayed silent, nursing her debts, her pride battered but intact. She hadn't reached out for forgiveness or absolution. There was a final twist I couldn't ignore. Ava's story was still unwritten, and I suspected she was scripting her own reckoning somewhere in the city's shadows. I unlocked my laptop and drafted a message to her, a simple line, meet me Friday at 6. I have something you need to see. My finger hovered over send. What would she say? Would she come? Would she be ready to face the truths that had unraveled our family's facade? The bourbon burned my throat as I swallowed, and I realized that each step toward transparency demanded another leap of faith. My choices had rattled the family's foundations, but could they also rebuild them? As the grandfather clock's pendulum swung in the gathering darkness, I felt its rhythm echo in my own chest, steady, courageous, uncertain. Tomorrow I'd reach out to Ava, but tonight I stood alone with my reflections and an unanswered question. When you expose buried secrets, do you set people free, or doom them to confront demons they'd rather keep chained? The clock chimed 9 times, and I whispered into the stillness, let the reckoning begin. And that was where I left it, on the brink of another confrontation, another chance for redemption or ruin. The pendulum swung on, and so would I, into the next chapter. I met Ava on Friday at 6 sharp outside the old coffee roastery on University Avenue, the place where I used to escape family drama and map out Nimbus Sync's early storyboard on napkins. The air was cool with hints of oak smoke and fresh espresso, and I spotted her immediately, her shoulders squared, arms crossed, gaze fixed on the neon open sign. She looked smaller than I remembered, like life had flattened her swagger into something tighter, more hesitant. I took a deep breath, squared my own shoulders, and approached. Ava. My voice felt loud in the quiet evening. She turned surprise and apprehension warring in her eyes. Alex. She kept her distance, but I gestured inside. Coffee? She hesitated, then nodded, stepping through the door. Inside, the baristas were wrapping up the evening shift. Their chatter and clatter seemed a world apart from our charged stillness. I ordered 2 pour-overs, your standard, then led her to a corner table beneath a framed photograph of the original building's smokestack, crusted in rust but still proud. You picked the spot, she said, voice low. You used to come here when Nimbus Sync was a dream. I gave a small smile, figured it was neutral ground. She glanced at my cup, then hers. So, what's this about? Her question hung like a challenge. I leaned forward. I asked you here because I need you to face the truth. Her brow furrowed. Which truth I thought of? The countless ways she'd dismissed me, how she'd avoided Grandma's funeral call, how she'd never asked about Nimbus Sync beyond a cursory. So, playing with computers still, I took a sip of coffee. Let its warmth anchor me. Yesterday, I sent Veronica and Randall a restructuring proposal to save our people, our community, the ones Grandma cared for. But you stayed silent. Ava's lips pressed in a thin line. I was embarrassed. Her admission landed like a stone. Embarrassed that you inherited everything, that you built an empire from nothing while I was drowning in credit card debt and broken promises. She flinched. That wasn't my fault. I met her gaze. It was your choice. My words weren't cruel, they were simple, undeniable. She looked away, focusing on the steam rising from her cup. The symbol on the sleeve, a tiny rooster nestled in a circle, reminded me of how Grandma always said, "Roosters crow not to prove power, but to greet each new day." That detail, this bird motif, had become our unspoken symbol for fresh starts. I pointed to it. "Remember this logo Grandma liked?" She said it meant resilience, crowing at sunrise no matter how dark the night. Ava's gaze drifted back to me, a flicker of memory softening her features. "I remember." She sighed, heavy with regret. "I've been too ashamed to show up. I avoided Grandma's second memorial last month. I kept thinking if I didn't face her absence, I wouldn't feel the guilt." Her voice cracked. The confession made the cafe noise fade to a dull hum. Only her words and the rooster emblem mattered. I exhaled slowly. "You're mired in shame, but Grandma taught us to transform shame into action." I slid a small envelope across the table. Inside are letters of recommendation from Nimbus Synca's leadership team. "I'm offering you a fellowship 6 months on our community outreach program at the Iris Patterson Center. You'll work directly with underprivileged kids learning to code. You'll earn it." She stared at the envelope as if it were a ticking bomb. Her head snapped up. "Why would you do that?" I let the question hang. "Because someone needs to prove they can build something meaningful on their own terms. And because you still have the chance to make amends." The risk pulsed between us, forgiveness offered, but only if she acted. Ava picked up the envelope, trembling. I don't deserve this." I leaned back, letting her words echo. "No one deserves grace, they earn it." I watched her hands tighten around the letters, saw her internal battle play out in her eyes, fear, pride, desperation. She nodded once sharply. "I'll do it." Her voice was small, but it carried weight. We sat in silence, only the rooster logo and our breathing bridging the chasm of decades. Later, after we left the cafe, I walked Ava to her car. Streetlights cast long shadows on the pavement. She turned to me. "Thank you for not making this about money." I nodded. "It's about legacy." She opened her car door, hesitated. Then she said, "I'm scared I'll fail again." I placed a hand on her shoulder, an echo of Grandma's chess advice. "Don't fear mistakes. Then fail well. Learn, is a tool." She managed a half smile before slipping inside and driving off, headlights fading into the night. That night, I sat in my loft with the letter's seal still in my pocket. The servers hummed, the clock ticked, and outside the skyline blinked in and out. I drank bourbon slowly, contemplating the chain reaction I'd set in motion. Veronica baking cookies, Randall restructuring operations, Theo rebuilding his life, now Ava stepping into a fellowship that would damn well test her mettle. Each of them, once spectators to my solitary rise, was now compelled into the arena. The rooster symbol shimmered on my coffee mug, resilience renewal, the break of dawn. But dawn demands night's surrender first. As the grandfather clock edged toward midnight, my phone buzzed. A text from Elena, DOJ, impressed by transparency plan. They want to discuss leniency terms. Then another from Sophia, board approves Ava's fellowship kickoff Monday. And a third, a silent, unreadable message from Randall, 2 words. "Thank you." I stared at those words. Uncle Randy. The man who once claimed he had no time for me. He was alone in gratitude, curiously tender and terrifying. I closed my eyes and imagined Grandma Iris in her garden at Sunset Vista, roses and bloombirds trilling. I could almost hear her soft proclamation, "You've done well, my dears, but remember, the hardest battles aren't won in courtrooms or boardrooms, they're won in hearts." My chest tightened. The equation of legacy, justice, love, each variable shifting unpredictably. I realized that even as the family's ethical architecture rebuilt itself, new fault lines would emerge between ambition and empathy, between privacy and transparency, between retribution and redemption. A final twist settled in my bones. I had orchestrated this reckoning, yet I was still vulnerable. If Ava floundered, if the DOJ reneged, if Randall's relief turned to resentment, or if Veronica's progress unraveled, I'd face another crucible. The stage was set, each actor committed to a role they'd never rehearsed for. And me, I was both playwright and leading man, forced to trust that the story I'd rewritten could reach a satisfying finale. The grandfather clock chimed 12 times. Its pendulum swung in the dark room, steady, unwavering. And in that moment, I understood the real test wasn't in exposing the past nor in demanding amends, it was in sustaining the fragile hope that those we loved could choose something better tomorrow. I lifted my glass in a silent toast to the coming dawn, to the rooster crowing at sunrise, to a family learning to face itself. And there I'll leave you standing at the threshold of a new chapter, where redemption is offered on the razor's edge between grace and failure, where every heart must decide whether to crow again or to remain silent through the longest night. The morning of my wedding arrived like a soft exhale, as if the universe itself paused to let me draw a full breath before the next act. I woke in my loft to the steady hum of servers, the grandfather clock's pendulum swinging in the corner with deliberate certainty. For years, that clock had marked every moment of hope and heartbreak in my life, but today, I let it tick without worrying how many beats remained. I dressed in a crisp navy suit, Veronica's favorite color she'd once confessed, and paused before the mirror. In the reflection, I saw more than the man who had inherited a multi-million-dollar legacy. I saw the boy who'd spent decades invisible now, stepping into his own story. My phone buzzed a message from Ava sending a photo of the small coding lab she'd set up at the Iris Patterson Community Center. The kids beamed behind laptops bearing the rooster emblem we'd chosen as our symbol of resilience. I smiled, heart swelling with pride. Ava had turned her shame into purpose, just as Grandma had always envisioned. At noon, I walked through the halls of the center past murals of rocket ships and circuitry to meet Sophia, who had insisted on a quick photo of us together. Just in case we need stock images for the nonprofit's website, she joked, her bright energy a buoy against my nerves. I locked eyes with her in the lens and offered a genuine smile. No boardroom facade, just gratitude for a partner who had stood by me through every storm. Behind us, a banner read, Iris Patterson Center, Grand Opening and Wedding Reception in bold teal letters. It felt surreal to combine these two milestones in one celebration, but that's what Grandma's legacy demanded, to honor her work by weaving our personal triumphs into the community's tapestry. The courtyard doors opened at 2, and guests began to arrive, union leaders from Hayes Construction grateful for the job preservation plan. Eliza from the DOJ, who'd negotiated the leniency terms to spare the community while holding the family accountable. And of course my parents, Maria and Victor's widow, standing hand in hand, both dressed in soft gray. My mother's eyes were glossy as she reached out to smooth my lapel. You're everything Iris believed you'd be, she whispered. For once, I accepted her praise without reservation. Veronica arrived in a simple lavender dress, no jewelry, no fanfare, carrying a platter of cookies and lemon curd jars sealed with the rooster stickers we'd adopted. She caught my eye and tipped her head in a small salute, cookie breach protocol compliance. She said, voice tremulous with nerves. I laughed, the sound light and free. She'd baked every batch herself over the last 2 weeks, texting me photos of burnt and nearly perfect rounds. Each flour-dusted success had been a step toward sincerity, and here she stood, wafer-thin veil of humility finally lifted. Theo followed her in cradling a wrapped box. For the groom, he said, offering me a handcrafted chess set carved from salvaged oak, each piece modeled on a different member of the family, Bishops as Grandma in her power boots, Rooks as her sturdy trucks, a queen crowned in a copy of her memoir cover. He met my eyes with a quiet pride, the brother I'd never truly known until the moment he apologized in my boardroom. Thought you might like a reminder that every move counts, he said. I clasped his shoulder. Thank you, Theo. Every move and every misstep has led me here. By 3, the courtyard was awash in late spring sun. Rows of white chairs faced a simple wooden arch entwined with wisteria and fairy lights. I stood beneath it with Sophia at my side, heart thudding like the first time I pitched Nimbus Sync to skeptical investors. At the back, Ava greeted guests entering the community lab next door. She'd invited a dozen of her coding students, their shy faces peeking around the doors. When I caught her eye, she gave a small wave, her confidence freshly forged from the fellowship I'd offered. I realized she'd already become a mentor in her own right, another echo of Grandma's legacy. As the officiant, a longtime family friend and community pastor, began speaking, I caught Grandma's favorite pocket watch in my breast pocket. It was brass and warm against my chest, the last memento she'd given me before passing. Its hands were stopped at 5:32 p.m., the exact moment she'd finished dictating her will. I unclipped it, held it up, and allowed the guests to notice. This watch, I began, voice steady, has marked every Tuesday I spent with my grandmother at Sunset Vista. It stopped at the moment she entrusted me with her legacy. Today I restart it, to honor her, to honor each of you, and to mark the beginning of our shared tomorrow. I clicked the crown and the watch's tick resumed, soft but insistent. The courtyard hushed, and I felt every eye on me reflecting hope and forgiveness. Vows were brief, my own words too laden with emotion to expand much beyond, I choose you, and I promise to keep arriving. But when I spoke of presence over inheritance, of grace earned through action, my voice rang clear. Sophia stood across from me, tears in her eyes, and as we exchanged rings, simple bands engraved with the rooster logo we sealed, Not only our love, but the family's new covenant to build with honesty, to serve with humility, and to crow at sunrise no matter how dark the night had been. After the ceremony, we moved to the lab for a ribbon cutting. Ava handed me the giant scissors, her hands steady now, and I cut the ribbon with Sophia beside me. The room behind us roared into life as kids' computer screens glowed for the first time under the center's roof. The energy was electric, like launching 1,000 rockets of possibility. Parents and community members crowded in asking questions, offering donations, volunteering for tutoring. All evidence that Grandma's vision had taken root. The evening wound down with speeches and laughter. Randall stood to toast voice thick. To my nephew, who taught me that leadership is service. I watched as he lifted his glass to me, a man who had once claimed he had no time for me, now publicly honoring the journey we'd shared. Veronica rose next, cookie platter in hand. I baked these for you, she said, voice cracking. And for you, she added, offering cookies to her siblings. I hope they taste like honesty. The room laughed and applauded, and I caught each of my family's eyes, knowing none of this had come easily. As twilight deepened, I slipped away to stand by the grand clock centerpiece in the courtyard, a replica of the one in my loft, its glass face reflecting string lights and hopeful faces. Sophia found me and wound the clock's key, setting its hands to the exact time of our vows. It's our clock now, she whispered. I nodded, leaning into her warmth. Our time, I agreed. But even as the celebration blazed around us, music, dancing, community in bloom, I felt a quiet tremor of uncertainty. The DOJ's leniency hinged on continued transparency. Hayes Construction still teetered between collapse and revival. Ava's fellowship would demand resilience she hadn't yet fully proven. And deep down I knew the hardest work was still ahead, sustaining this fragile reconciliation when the cameras left and the cupcakes were gone. That night, as the last guest drifted away and volunteers cleared chairs, I stood alone beneath the clock. The kids' laughter echoed from the lab. Somewhere a code compiler chimed completion. I wondered if Grandma, if she could witness this moment, would nod in approval or caution me that a legacy is not maintained by a single day's triumph, but by every small, sometimes painful choice we make thereafter. I pulled a flask of bourbon from my suit pocket, my father's old habit, and took a slow sip, the smoky warmth grounding me. I checked my phone messages from Elena confirming the DOJ's preliminary satisfaction, a thank you text from union reps, an invitation from Ava to join her first coding workshop next week, and unexpectedly, a voicemail from Randall. Can we talk Sunday? I need your advice on next steps. I closed the voice app without listening, opting instead to watch the clock's pendulum. It swung in the dim light, steady, unwavering. I whispered into the night. We begin again tomorrow. And as I walked away, hand in Sophia's bourbon and pocket clock's echo in my chest, I realized that happy endings in family stories are less a period than an ellipsis, an invitation to keep writing, to keep striving, to keep arriving. Shadows lengthened, lights dimmed, but in the swaying of that clock and the promise of sunrise beyond the courtyard walls, I felt certain of one thing. The true test of this new dawn would not be a grand gesture, but the simple act of presence day after day, swing after swing, heartbeat after heartbeat. And with that, I closed the chapter on this celebration, stepping forward into the uncharted yet hopeful expanse of tomorrow, ready to meet whatever came next. Story 2. I never imagined that a Tuesday night dinner could feel like a sentencing, but there I was, sitting at the old oak table, fork trembling in my hand. I'm Eric, 29 years old, and that evening my father broke me. Over meatloaf and mashed potatoes, he looked me in the eye and delivered the verdict. You work so your brother can have a good life. That's just how families work. His voice was flat final. My mother, eyes fixed on her napkin, didn't protest. My brother Jason just grinned as he scooped another forkful, oblivious to the tremor in my chest. Jason, the kid who couldn't keep a job for 3 months, who wrote off 2 wrecked cars I'd helped him buy, who once called me at 3 a.m., whining about overdrafts and dates at rooftop bars, sat there comfortable, smug. And me, I sat frozen, feeling the years of effort. The promotions, I declined the vacations, I canceled the sofas I slept on when I should have gone to my own apartment, all flashing by like a bitter slideshow. I finished dinner in silence, excusing myself with a weak, no dessert. I've got an early start. In my tiny, half-furnished apartment later that night, I finally let the dam burst. 29 years of picking up their slack, the surprise birthday forgotten every year, the emergency car repairs, the loans with that never a peep about repayment weighed on me like a lead blanket. I hadn't slept a wink replaying Dad's words until dawn. By sunrise, I'd made up my mind. I called out of work, pulled out boxes, and quietly started packing the life I'd neglected. I reached HR and asked if that out-of-state transfer was still open. It was. My paycheck stopped going into the family shared account. I opened a new one. I canceled auto payments on their bills, removed my name from their insurance policy. They didn't notice. For 2 weeks, I kept smiling at dinner, helped Jason craft resumes for jobs he never applied to, nodded politely at Dad's lectures about real responsibility. It felt like playing a part in a play I already knew the ending to, but for once, I controlled the script. Then came the Friday I'd been waiting for. A warm breeze carried the smell of cut grass through the backyard. Dad, beer in hand, chatted with the neighbor about the challenges of raising two boys as if I were still crashing on his couch. Jason tinkered with the motorcycle I bought him. Mom lounged inside, glued to her crime show. I walked through the sliding door with 2 packed bags and my laptop case. Going somewhere, Dad asked without looking up. Yeah, I said coolly. Jason peered out, frowning. Moving? His confusion was almost sweet. What do you mean, moving? I'm done, I said, finally meeting all their eyes. You said I existed to bankroll Jason's life. Well, now you figure out how to do that without me. Mom's face went pale. Eric, what are you talking about? For years, I've been your crutch financially, emotionally, everything. Not anymore. I accepted the transfer. I'm leaving the state. Bills are in the mail due next week. Dad laughed outright. You'll be back. You always come back. I studied his smug certainty. Not this time, I said, turned and walked away. No slam, no shout. Just a calm exit. The quiet behind me was the sweetest sound I'd ever heard. Predictably, the fallout began the next morning. My phone flooded with missed calls and texts from Mom, silent and pleading. When I ignored them, Dad's messages turned accusatory. You think you're better than us? Grow up and come home. I read each one like lines in a bad script. No apologies? No, I'm wrong. Just entitlement. A few days later, Jason texted about the power going out. The rent unpaid, the insurance lapsed. I'd already removed myself from all that. I didn't gloat. I simply let it happen. This was accountability, not cruelty. When Mom left a handwritten letter, long, nostalgic, dripping with memories of scraped knees and birthday cakes, I felt a twinge. But I remembered that night at Meatloaf, her silent nod while Dad told me I worked solely for Jason. That silence burned more than any harsh word. I settled into my new routine morning coffee on my balcony gym sessions after work, dusting off old paintbrushes I'd abandoned in college. My apartment felt like mine for the first time, truly mine. I even started dating Lena from marketing, carefully honestly. Meanwhile, back home, chaos reigned. Jason missed an interview. The lights stayed off. The car got impounded because insurance lapsed. Dad tried to open a bank account in my name. Thankfully, I'd frozen it. Furious, he ranted to anyone who would listen, convinced I'd come crawling back. He finally sent one terse text. You'll regret this. I just deleted it. Then came the late-night knock. I peeked through the peephole, my father standing on my porch, eyes wild, fists clenched. He shouldn't have known my address. I'd been careful. Panic flared in me, but I kept my voice steady as I called the police. Yes, I need to report someone trespassing. He's my father. Sirens in the distance felt like sweet vindication. When the officer ordered him off the property, I watched his shoulders sag powerless. He stormed away muttering. As the patrol car's lights faded, I realized something profound for the first time I'd drawn a line. Someone else was setting the rules now. That night, I wrestled with doubt. Was I too harsh? But then I remembered Dad's words at dinner. You work so Jason can have a good life. I wasn't collateral damage in their comfort. I was a person. The next morning, an email from Mom arrived, short, sincere apology for staying silent, admitting she'd depended on me too much. No demands, just a crack in the armor. I considered replying just to say I see it, but I hovered then, deleted. Not yet. Jason sent his final salvo of venomous email calling me cold, bitter, pathetic. I didn't open it. Instead, I watched the busy street below, free at last from the constant buzz of demands. Weeks passed. When the inevitable lawsuit arrived, Frank and Margaret Collins versus Eric Collins, implied agreement to support them. I laughed so hard my coffee steamed. But I hired a lawyer, presented every text, bank statement, voicemail, email. The judge dismissed their case as baseless, awarded me legal fees. We garnished their tax refund to cover the $200. I hated that part, but it was business. In the aftermath, Jason moved in with an ex-girlfriend and took a part-time delivery gig. Dad seethed about betrayal, but no one listened anymore. Mom sent one last note. I hope you're happy. You deserve to be. I never responded. Maybe someday. Today I wake up without a pit in my stomach. I spend my money on me, laugh with friends who ask nothing, paint in my living room, and date someone who values me. The old Eric, overworked, overwhelmed, hoping for scraps of affection, has vanished. In his place stands someone stronger, wiser, freer. Someone who finally understands that family isn't an obligation. It's a choice. If they ever want in, they'll have to earn it.